tail we saw them go up against. Am I correct with this?
Yeah, a narrow loss there. I mean, they were
crazy.
It was kind of a heartbreaking loss for them too. They were up 4-1 at one point, and then Squirtle came in, and well, you know, he got a 4-kill in going through players like Gumiho, Leenock, things like that. So Squirtle put on a great performance. Now, of course, FXO is the 2-time consecutive reigning champions of GSTL, so they're arguably the strongest team in the world right now, although, of course, I think StarTale's giving them a run for that at the moment, especially with their very strong start here in this team league.
And conversely, Evil Geniuses with a lot of great pickups lately. You know, definitely has the potential to make a good push here. And hey, honestly, who knows, man? Coming off here with Jaedong versus Choya. Choya, notorious for his cheesy openings in some situations. I mean, it's definitely his classic playstyle. If we go back to when I was like I was the biggest GSL watcher probably on the East Coast. I don't know that I could match those West Coast guys. There's too many of them because the time zone's closer, you know?
Right.
But I know I was the closest on the East Coast because like, nobody was staying up till 4 to 7 a.m. every day. But yeah, Choya guys used to really be known for that cheese. And well, we'll be keeping an eye out to see if we do see any here.
I think he's going to Nexus first for the time being, but that does not preclude that there will be some sort of a big gateway play here in just a second. Of course, because he went for Nexus first, he's just going to mess around with that probe for a while and try and block this hatchery, but he's not going to drop down a pylon or anything along those lines. And eventually, Jaedong gets down that hatchery. Back on Choya's side, nothing out of the ordinary. Forge popping up, pylon at just the right time. Overlord is going to see it all. Of course, this is Cloud Kingdom, so inevitably an Overlord will park itself right over this little path here and catch anything that runs out the front.
Ugh, I am just hating that map, Condemned Ridge. It's so large. Sometimes, Kevin, I don't find their base. I'm like, I have no idea what you're doing right now. And then I find out they actually open with 2 gateways and no forge, and there's a bunch of zealots running towards my base. I'm like, quick, 2 gases, Roach Horn, survive.
Well, that's been part of... I've been watching, obviously, a lot of Pro League, like everyone else has. And that's been part of the fun of Pro League, too, is that we have a lot of new maps that are being utilized. Because of the Pro League format, they don't have to be balanced. You pick ahead of time what race you want to throw up there, what player you want to throw up there. So it's made for some very interesting dynamic games. And, you know, you mentioned Condemned Ridge, of course, that being a map that you don't like to see as much because of how big it is. But it does lend to some pretty clever strategies because you don't have the established, well, it's a relatively close walk distance. You have to stay safe with the forge, things like that.
Yeah, it makes for exciting games. So, all right, Choya here. Well, he's got both his gases done in his main base. We'll be seeing in about a minute or so if he goes to take that gas at his natural expansion. Meanwhile, Jaedong has gotten down his third, and things are just looking pretty standard here. No gas in the main base or natural of Jaedong, which is very important to take note of because we know he's not going to be going for any sort of cheesy aggression here. And I mean, honestly, we can be looking for things like that because as you were pointing out, we're seeing the effectiveness of kind of unorthodox strategies. Maybe not as much on a map like, I don't know, Cloud Kingdom. It's pretty tight and clean, but
right.
It is, you know, it's getting a little more in the meta, if we want to say it that way.
That is the one disadvantage I think I'll give for the Winners League format is that you do have to have a map pool that's all fairly balanced maps, very traditional maps, because otherwise, if you have a map like, Bifrost or something like that, then someone's going to throw in, you know, a ridiculous player that obviously the map is unbalanced towards particular sides, so... we'll see here. We've got a little bit of a difference. Choya going to drop down the Twilight Council. Of course, you mentioned his cheesy play before. While this is not, I mean, this is
he's on 2 gases,
looking more. Yeah, exactly. He's on 2 gases. Probably going to take an expansion here in a bit with a few more gateways, maybe a robotics facility, something like that. He is the kind of player to throw crazy DTs, weird strategies at you.
Hey, and you know what? It's not to say you can't do it off 2 gases. You can. Well, he doesn't have the gateways right now, so, I mean, that's more and more the possibility that he's only sitting on 150 gas, but he's got no minerals. I don't know, man. He's throwing down a 3rd gas right now.
And there's a sentry, though, so... Oh, but he's still going to do it. Yeah. This is going to be a Dark Shrine here in a second. 250 gas, and that'll pop down. It
does make a lot of sense in the regard that, you know, you're going to go for that quick 3rd Nexus. You don't need a lot of Dark Templar. You just need enough to keep them at bay. Jaedong throwing down the Roach Warren right now, guys, but, you know, he doesn't have a lair anywhere near started. He's not going to be able to push on this 3rd base. The DTs will shred it.
It's still a pretty late Dark Shrine, though. I mean, this is a Dark Shrine that came up after Warp Gate +1. All that business was started, So we'll see if it's still going to be effective here in just a bit. Now, Jaedong, you mentioned he doesn't have layer tech, but he doesn't have an evolution chamber either. So things could actually get a little bit worrisome for him. There we go. Evolution chamber coming down now, and he'll be able to start some spore crawlers easy. Oh, but look at this. He picks up on the pylon down at the bottom right-hand corner. There's nothing that Choya can do about that.
Oh, that Zealot was so determined, but his armor is just too heavy. He'll turn around, head back to his base, as Choya's going to take a third base now. And Metabolic Boost also notably starting up for Jaedong as he's throwing out some more gases.
Yeah, a lot of gas banked up for Choya at the moment, of course, finishing up, multiple gateways as his Dark Shrine is going to complete. So, it'll be an interesting question as to where Jaedong's going to go from here. He hasn't picked up on this Twilight Council nor the Dark Shrine. Certainly he's going to feel the presence of the Dark Templar here in just a bit. They have to be warped in at this pylon, though. Otherwise they'll... Well, okay, never mind. He did actually pop them up under the guise of this Overlord.
Well, that lets... If Jaedong happened to be looking at that position, he would, of course, be able to hear those Dark Templar warping in. It would make it very, very obvious. But he's pushing on across the map right now, and he actually wants those roaches at home. So, well, he's spotted it. Overlord being constructed right now. He's going to try to deny this third with these lings and roaches, and, well, we'll see if he's successful. He doesn't go for the pylon, though. However, definitely worth pointing out, which is going to allow units to be warped in up at this expansion.
That's right, and there's a DT here to start warding these away, and DTs, of course, have very high DPS, and if they're not detected, they will cleave through these roaches very quickly. 3 shots, and each of those fall down. Zealots and additional sentries being warped in to try and save this Nexus. At the same time, a hatchery has actually been destroyed. Choya doing some pretty good work there, and Jaedong does not have enough to take out this Nexus, so losing a hatchery of his own and failing to kill the Nexus, that's a pretty big blow to Jaedong.
It definitely is, but you know what? I want to point out something from Jaedong that I have been a big advocate of. I really like when we see players do this. He put his macro hatch directly next to his most vulnerable expansion. And this means, he lost that third base, but check it out, he's still able to mine off this. And, not at optimum efficiency, but it is far better than the situation he would be in if that macro hatch was in his main base.
Now, one thing that's really going for him, too, is that he made a lot of attack units. His opponent has somewhat of a stout defense. Okay, there we go. No, but the Zerglings get in time. That's what I was wondering, if they were going to be able to bust down the front door before anything decided to hit. And indeed they have. Sentries have not taken too much damage yet, but finally the Roaches make their way in to start closing with a couple of these units. The Zealots in Force Fields have actually been fairly decent. He hasn't lost many of his sentries, but there's so much stuff here that he's going to start losing these one by one.
Now, see, he hadn't lost a single sentry until now, and he lost 3. If he didn't lose any, we could say that he definitely came out ahead there. Ultimately, though, 3 sentries, that's a lot of resources. And, with the amount of tech that Choya is currently sitting on, gas is something that he's going to be finding a difficult time acquiring enough of.
Okay, well, a lot of Zerglings just popped out for Jaedong, something like 31, I'm sorry. So it's still a decent amount. Those Zerglings were kind of just thrown away. They actually don't kill any units there. Nice job by Choya, actually, to save a couple of those very hurt units that were at the back.
That Changeling really wanted to kill that Stalker.
Yeah.
It failed.
Changelings, such powerful units. But Jaedong, it looks like he made a big pack of Zerglings to try and just finish off this Nexus, but he got nowhere close enough and didn't gather up all his forces in time.
Yeah, it was definitely a good attempt there, but ultimately, Choya, he had things on lockdown. He had enough sentries to hold that off, and actually a really good balance of his sentry and Stalker and Zealot count, because the Zealots seemed to just die off as the Zerglings were dying. There barely any Zerglings made it in by the time the Zealots were dead, so really nice balance there from Choya on his unit composition, but...
Yeah.
Here's Jaedong grabbing his 4th base now. His 3rd is reestablished and running. Pathogen glands on the way. He's got a lot of things really ramping up right now. But Choya's not in a position to push right now, Kevin. This is an ample time for Jaedong in a minute after the Infestors are actually just being started. That he's very vulnerable right now, but...
All right. Yeah, well, I mean, the pathogen glands are going to be finished here in just a bit. But, Choya just invested in a lot of infrastructure. He didn't put a ton of units on the map. You can see this is still pretty much all he has. While he is in a position very soon with 12 gateways, that robotics facility, all his upgrades in place, when he detects that there's a moment to go or when there's a little bit of a threat to him, yes, then he can just start warping in 12 units at a time, moving over to Colossus production eventually, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But for now, this has left him a little weak to push.
This worries me. As you said, eventually get to Colossus. When is eventually? We're at 14 minutes, and he's just starting his first observer. He has no robotics facility, or robotics, on the way right now. Okay, it's going to be a Templar Archives, which makes a lot more sense. He can very quickly move into a nice balance of those Archons, and now going to be falling back, but... Here we are, guys. I mean, J-Donk's going up to Spire. Maybe you'll see Hive in a second here.
You know, of course, but not giving yourself the flexibility to produce Colossi, of course, does weaken your overall position. And J-Donk has all of his tech paths are all hitting. The pathogen glands obviously already finished, as he's got a lot of infestors out there. So his tech looks pretty good at the moment. I don't know if he's going to try.
Excellent against Pure Gateway. Here we go. Infestors unburrowing. There's not an observer. It's caught in the front right now, but it doesn't get caught by that fungal growth. Nice job out of Choi getting out of there with some units. He's going to counterattack here with some Dark Templar while doing a Zealot Warp in over here at the natural expansion.
Okay, so J-Donk takes a little bit of damage from this and may lose a hatchery if he's not careful. Because of these +3 attack Dark Templar, they're doing 60 damage a swing. Finally, though, some units catch up, but it looks like the hatchery is going to fall. No transfusions.
That was perfect calculation out of Choya.
Yeah.
Because that 4th Dark Templar left. It's still in the 3rd base, killing off workers. And he easily could have left that 4th Dark Templar at that expansion, but he realized, I only need 3, and how close a line that was that Choya walked, but he made it across.
Now this is a tough position for J-Dong a little bit, though. He's got to reestablish that base steady. He's got a very powerful army, but his opponent has now gone up through the Archon route. At the same time, he's continuing to put pressure on, and this is pulling back J-Dong's army again. And that alone is worth the investment there for Choya. These are actually the same Zealots. They were pretty hurt, as you can see, and ends up doing a little bit more damage while there's an engagement in the middle.
You know, historically, Choya, not so exceptional with this style of play. I was doubting a bit whether he's going to be able to handle all this, but he's just doing an incredibly good job harassing right now, as this engagement is actually turning into a little more than J-Dong wants. The Infestor's getting chased down towards the bottom. He is trading Infested Terrans for a couple of units, but how many Infestors get away there, Kevin? I mean, I see he's got 4 more on the way.
1. Wow. He lost 7 Infestors just then. So that's a big win for Choya, because now Choya is stabilized on Colossus Tech. He's got his Archons in production. Of course, at some point, he's going to need a 4th base. This one's going to mine out relatively soon. And indeed, as soon as we say it, it gets dropped down.
Roaches, he needs to make sure if this goes down, he cancels it. He does not. 400 minerals down the drain, but actually, Choya's got quite a few minerals in the bank right now, so.
Yeah, I don't want to call it an upside to having an excess of minerals sitting around, of course, but it did go down very quickly. It looks like this War Prism is getting chased away, trying to make its way into the main. Are there any units to be able to deal with this? No, not quite yet, and these Dark Templar could do some damage.
Large warp in, many Zealots accompanying them as well, and this is actually going to bring J-Dong's army home. He was gearing up for a big push to deny that 4th base. Is going to be unsuccessful, going to lose his Infestation Pit. Will he lose the Greater Spire as well? I don't think Choya has noticed that it's going up. Nope, it's going to go down. The units will die.
Yes, so Choya's attack is going to be stopped, but losing the Infestation Pit does hurt. Of course, his Hive Tech is preserved. He's still going up to Greater Spire, but he wants to complement his force with more Infestors right now. He's got 9 on the field, but he doesn't exactly want 114 Zerglings. Those get mowed down by Archons. Those get mowed down by a bunch of Colossi.
Can we actually take a look? Okay, he restarted it, because if somehow J-Dong had forgotten to restart that Infestation Pit, let's just say, like, Broodlords without Infestors are actually just, they're pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, there's no protection. I mean,
they blink right past them, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, you have no way to protect yourself against Blink Stalkers. Now, this is kind of interesting, because the high AoE DPS units were actually engaging the Infestors, and the Zerglings were able to get in. I can't call it...
fields were
right.
Really nice for Choya, though.
Yes.
But he got rid of a lot of those links, so that's pretty good for J-Dong.
Right. That's about as good of an engagement right there as he could have asked for, and you still see the lack of effect that the Zerglings had.
Well, no Broodlords on the way yet. The Greater Spire is done. I actually don't think he has Corruptors on the field. Nice fungal growth, going to catch a lot of these units, but I just don't think there's enough stuff here for J-Dong.
No, and it looks like he's about to lose this base again. He GG's, and J-Dong goes down to FXO's coach, Choya, taking game number 1 for FX Open Esports.
He looked good. We saw that War Prism going down along with those 12 gateways, as you said, Kev. Mm-hmm. You know, we didn't see any splash tech on the way. I was like, well, Choya cannot fight this army of J-Dong heads up, because he's got Infestors, Lings, Roaches. That's how you annihilate a gateway-based army. And he used Dark Templars really efficiently to snipe expansions, and he used Zealot Warpins in excellent form as well to keep J-Dong, simply put, from being allowed to push across the map. All
right, so that's game number 1. Game number 2, the next Evil Geniuses player is... Puma, Terran player. So we're going to be on Antigua Shipyard. Let's go ahead and run to a commercial break. And when we get back, guys, it'll be time for game number 2 between EG and FXO.